A Transformers, older than me, sweet-eyed. Although by space dark, see this thought I gave you the voices all listen. The Transformers. The Transformers, older than me, sweet-eyed. The Transporters.
You're listening to League Podcast Special Edition, our second interview with Flint Dille, writer of Transformers, G.I. Joe, Inhumanoids, Visionaries, pretty much anything you watched as a kid if you lived in the 80s. This guy had a hand in it, and this is our second time having him on. He's so gracious and so nice. By the way, I'm Matt Dursin. Sorry.
And by the way, I'm John Hunt, and I second everything Matt just said about Flint Dille. He's a wonderful man.
He's very fun to talk to. He's very easygoing. His memory is astounding of a lot of the things. This is 35 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is actually why we wanted to have him on. Thank you, John, for pointing out the Five Faces of Darkness, which was the series right after Transformers the movie.
Yes, the continuation.
A month later, basically.
Yeah. Every September, I break out the Five Faces of Darkness and watch it. I do. It was a thing for me. It was just the time in my life at that point that I was like just happy. And that always reminds me of being happy. Unlike now, where nothing makes me happy.
Yeah, I have very fond memories of it as well. I don't break it out every September, or maybe I will now. I don't know.
I even found out what time they aired it on our local channel. And I would watch it at that time. I would break it into the 5 days, Monday through Friday, and watch it at 4:00 or whatever.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, I'm a little crazy.
No.
I've been working by myself for so many years that,
But that's actually kind of cool. It kind of harkens me back to a time of Transformers was on in the afternoon after school. And I had CCD on Mondays, and I always missed the Monday one,
that's rough, man.
But
no, because this was one of those things I remember specifically thinking about. I couldn't wait for new Transformers episodes, and then when it started on as a miniseries, I couldn't wait to find out what happened the next day. And that's I don't get excited about much anymore. So being able to relive that kind of feeling is just it's special to me. So thank you, Flint. And here's the interview.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks to you.
So thank you first for coming back a second time on our illustrious podcast.
That's right. That's right. We've done this before.
Yeah, we did, and it was so much fun. We had to get you back, and thank you for agreeing. It's
So what are we talking about today?
We had a specific idea to talk about the Five Faces of Darkness, the miniseries, right after the movie. To us, that was like a second movie almost, right? I mean.
Yeah, I mean, my fantasy has always been, now this doesn't exist in the real world, but I think it would be cool. It has always been that we one day would just make that do it over again, like it is a second movie. I mean, you go back in, you fix, there were a lot of problems at the time, I mean, it was just, during this sort of downtime between, Sunbow and Marvel and it was kind of the end of the era, and we had all the problems. Because if you recall, when the 86 movie came out, it was not a success, and people thought, oh, this is a disaster, and so the budget got cut and the production was bad and all that. I would love to go back to Five Faces of Darkness, edit it into being like the length of the movie, get the animation right, do the in-betweening, and have it be kind of a companion piece for the movie, which is what it was always supposed to be.
Well, lengthwise, it is 5 22-minute, or 20 whatever ish minutes episodes. So that's kind of actually longer than the movie. The movie was 88 minutes.
That's what I'm saying. You cut it down, you'd fix stuff, you'd put things in there, and I mean, there were scenes, because there was a lot of places where there was animation that didn't come in, and we didn't get scenes, and we sort of had to, fudge it and put voiceover and all that. It'd be fun to just go back and do it right.
Well, I know as fans in 1986, we were super psyched, especially that at the very beginning when you actually there are clips from the movie.
Oh yeah, I just watched the 30-second clips on a loop when
Because we didn't have any other way to watch
yeah.
the movie.
Also, yeah, and the animation was a little better. So.
Yeah, it was a little better.
Yeah, no,
What was-
that'd be fun to do. Yeah,
What
I mean,
was-
you have
what was
to start
great?
with, sorry, what?
I was gonna say what was great was that you had the movie in August, and then you had new episodes picking up where
Yeah.
it left off a month later. Because I thought Transformers was done. There was no internet back then. I was like, this movie just kind of ends. We defeated Decepticons. I was like, oh, I don't know
Yeah,
where they would go with this.
Transformers, what's going on here? And then and that's what was kind of fun about it is that it kept going. Yeah, no, we knew we did third season. We knew it was a short season. And then, pretty early on, we knew they weren't ordering anymore. So, except to bring Optimus Prime back. So, in that season too, though we didn't, I don't know exactly what we knew at the time. I mean, it's, a lot of it's hindsight, but, though it's, was, fun to see what was going to happen. And we had a whole new kind of toy. And so, with the very nature of the toys were they're kind of much more space oriented. So, we knew we were going to have space adventures, and we had enough footage of the Autobots rolling along the desert. So we didn't do that anymore. So it's time to go to funny planets and have them fight monsters and meet all the other alien races out there, and, that kind of stuff.
Well, it did
CD,
seem that
obviously.
the first 2 seasons sort of followed a formula, and this just broke from that formula in terms of funny monsters and outer space stuff.
Yeah. Well, it started to change in the, pretty much around the end of season 2. You look at the last few episodes, and because a lot of them were aware that the movie was coming, so we're kind of prepping the movie. So we knew we were doing that, and so you can see it's beginning to shift. Yeah, there's season 1 that's pretty much you're on Earth, and you got Spike, and you got Sparkplug and all that. And by middle of season 2, we just that was kind of played. I mean, we could put them in space and bring Spike back as an old guy and Daniel and all that, but. And I have no idea how the decision was really made to set the movie that long afterwards, but it kind of works because there's this kind of period in the middle that would be fun to explore sometime.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that was if you had the opportunity to do that, explore the in between years, and maybe a comic or something at this point.
Yeah, I mean the only thing about that, and I mean it's this interesting little duel you have and kind of question issue you have with these things is you could do that. The only thing would be that it's kind of like the the Star Wars, the second trilogy that really was the first trilogy, the prequel trilogy, that when everything comes out, it's not that exciting unless you're simultaneously advancing the story into the future and filling some holes in between. And then you have to find that hook. It's got a Godfather 2 or something like that. I mean, because people like the story to move forward because they don't know what's going to happen. And I mean, there's been a lot of speculation on what the next season would have been. But because what's after really season 3, Transformers is always done by different people, and it was it's just a totally different thing, and it was different iterations. You started having things like Headmasters and Beast Wars and stuff like that. But yeah, the Five Faces of Darkness. I mean, what was cool about that for me was I don't think there were any scenes in there that were ever in the movie, and then they didn't make it in the movie, and we just stuck them in there. But there were scenes, it was very much written at the same time. And it was very much kind of same flesh as the movie, and it was like, hey, let's really we had these quintessons, let's really figure out who they are, and let's explore the world, and and we killed all these characters, and it's like, well, what if Starscream comes back as a ghost, or Optimus comes back as a zombie, which is a really bad idea. And then so the whole thing with Five Faces of Darkness was lay the the groundwork for we're heading into a whole new place of Transformers. And as I said, part of that was just the actual nature of the toys, that a lot of them did not look like Earthbound, that, and the first few seasons, they all looked like something that really existed on Earth. And by season three's toys, they were, I mean, the Outsweeps and Cyclonus would not fit in anywhere on Earth. I mean, they're just their own thing. And, and even Rodimus would be pretty conspicuous. I mean, the idea of being in disguise really doesn't, doesn't work.
But it was pretty cool because you're introduced to all these new characters in the movie, and then you're still introducing new Skylinks and the Predacons and Trypticon and Metroclack and stuff like that. So it was I thought it was cool. And then just a quick side note, Brad Garrett, the voice of Trypticon, according to IMDb, is that true? I had no idea. Brad Garrett.
Wait, I don't know.
okay.
I don't remember. I mean, I still see a lot of the voice actors now. We just did some stop motion things for the re-release of the movie. And like in the screening I saw of it, they had him, and we had John Machida and Greg Berger were there, and we'll get more of the guys back, because I run into them at conventions, and they all seem to be up for doing this stuff, So
you were actually at a convention in our neck of the woods recently, and
which one?
Was it in Boxborough?
Boxborough. Yes. Yeah, that was a Saturday morning convention. Yes.
Yeah. How was that?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I mean, it was small. I mean, I think people are still, COVID affected and stuff like that. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, we just, because it sort of broadened out and I, also my daughter goes to college near there, so I went and saw her, but so what we did is, and we dug in, it was different stuff because, like Buzz was in, Buzz Dixon, who was, a Sunbow guy. But we also worked together, Ruby Spears. And so they had a panel on Ruby Spears, which was kind of, in a lot of ways, it was the farm team that Sunbow came out of.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about all the stuff we were doing back then. And then, we just got, a bunch of these, these characters in there. And so it was fun. I mean, I don't know whether everybody else was fascinated by all this deep in reminiscing, but we thought it was really great.
We probably would have been fascinated. I don't know. Yeah, we should have gone. But Boxborough is a bit of a, even though we're all in Massachusetts, it's still kind of a hike. It's kind of out there. But yeah.
No, and
I had no idea there was Foxborough and Boxborough.
Yeah, I always thought it was
right next to each other.
The names of our towns.
It's the Boxborough Patriots that play there.
The Patriots, yeah.
They're probably better than the Patriots, but anyway, so like the Quintesson thing too, like we wanted to talk about that a little bit if you don't know.
How much of your script, how much was that from, you had that Secrets of Cybertron script? Is that sort of just, you took the basis?
Well, I mean, Secrets of Cybertron, influenced it, for anybody that doesn't know, what it was we got in the first draft of the script. And I mean, Ron was just a warehouse of images and ideas and crazy, stuff. But it was also, and this has no reflection on Ron whatsoever. It's what every writer runs into, and that is your first draft. Everybody has their idea. Every producer, the director, the toy company, everybody else, and they all throw in their ideas, and you try to write all of them. And that does not necessarily add up to a movie. I mean, it adds up to a bunch of really cool ideas. And so Jay showed up, Jay Bacall, who was creative director at Sunbow and Joe Bacall's son. But I mean, he, just like at that point, he was just out of Harvard, and he's kind of a child prodigy. And so he showed up in my apartment and said, we got to do something with this. And we had like a week. And so, we just, we're, looking at all this stuff and okay, let's do this. Let's, just make it, because we knew we had this giant planet that, transformed, let's, be Unicron. And so our idea was, well, the secret of Cybertron is that Cybertron itself transforms. And what the end of the movie is that you have to get the Autobot Matrix. And that's the real purpose of it. And you have to get it into the heart of Cybertron and transform it. And so you have this charge of the Light Brigade going in there where he's basically wiped out the entire 85 product line, which we're kind of glad we didn't do that. There's enough carnage in the movie, but that seemed like a real good idea somewhere in spring of 1985 or whenever we were doing this. And and we just loved the script. It was a lot of fun. We thought it really, was your sort of perfect, Joseph Campbell version of the Transformer movie. And unfortunately, Tom and Joe didn't share our enthusiasm for it. So, we had a couple of these testing meetings, but nevertheless, it influenced everything that followed a lot, because that was the moment when, I came on to Transformers. I'd been story editing GI and producing GI Joe right before that, and we were losing to a thing called GoBots, and our whole thing was to just give it some edge, and so we sort of ramped that up, and by the time we got to the movie, and that was the moment when I felt fully immersed. Didn't feel like I was, hunting around in somebody else's, playing in somebody else's playground, and decided, hey, what should we do with this? And if Secret of Cybertron, I've been trying to find a copy of the script of, and that's just one thing I didn't find. If I have it on some 3.5-inch Mac disc from 1980, whatever, and and someday I'll brave that. But and so, because now, there were probably only 7 scripts made. It would have been just for Jay and I and Joe and Tom and probably Roger Schleifer and Doug Booth and Carol Weitzman would have had one. But so that's why it's rare. It was never in wide release. Nelson probably had one, and I think Nelson did a version of the script too. I know, and I don't know that I ever saw it. I more heard about it than saw it. So when you see these these versions on the internet of the scripts, I never know what I'm looking at. I never know whether it's a real first draft or, and plus the fact the whole thing was a massively collaborative deal. In the real world, Joe and Tom and Jay's name should have been on all the scripts too. And Nelson. It was very much, it was very much team effort. The last 20 drafts might have gone through my computer, but it was a lot of input. It was just trying to harmonize all these different opinions.
Wow.
But anyway, so by the time we get to Five Faces of Darkness, now everybody else is off the field. Okay, the energy is now pretty much going to the GI Joe movie and what we're going to do with season 3 and kind of damage control from the Transformer movie. And at that same moment, I was developing a show called Visionaries, and I think I was finishing Humanoids. And if you remember those shows, those were
we do.
We're
We
big
were
fans.
fans. Yeah, we were big fans.
yeah.
That's another
Well,
podcast, I think.
The thing I found while I was searching through all my stuff is I found 2 Inhumanoid episodes that never aired. They were for season 2 that never happened. That was kind of fun.
Yeah, I was seeing that you were posting a lot of that stuff on your Facebook page several months back and such. Yeah.
Well, because I was going through 35 years of storage room, right? And then in the middle of it, we had, that turned out there was a foundation leak and we had to redo the storage room. And I had a lot more time to go through this than I thought I was going to. It was actually just a great experience. And so I was just like, but then, keep myself sane. Because, you're just going through 35 years of boxes and pretty much every object is keep or throw away. Because when we redid the storage, you can get rid of half of my storage. We have the external storage too, but and my wife was, saying, hey, yeah, look, this stuff I go in the dumpster. You haven't looked at it in 35 years. I said, no, people really like it.
Yeah, you auctioned off a lot of it, right?
I auctioned it off. My rule was, because she didn't believe that any of it had any value, that anything I made from it, I got to put into future projects. In other words, investing into stuff I'm doing now. And so she went for it because she thought, we weren't going to make anything. And it actually turned out to be quite lucrative.
There you go.
So I have my secret development fund now.
Nice.
So whose idea really? Because in our minds, this changes everything. It's like the origin of the Transformers and everything like that. The Quintessons created it. I don't know, with all those drafts, you maybe don't remember, but whose idea? It's okay, this is it. The Quintessons are there.
Well, there was a story called I don't remember exactly where the idea of the creators were. There was a store down the street from us in Westwood called Quintessence, right? That was a big idea in the 80s, the fifth essence, right? And so we decided, okay, we got Quintessons. And I have no idea who came up with that's lost in 35 years the actual thing. But it was great. They have 5 faces, and they're all saying different things, but no matter what happens, they're guilty. And yeah, and we just picture them as like the laziest things in the world. I mean, they had no body, so maybe they weren't lazy, but so they created all these things to do their work for them. And it was the 80s, right? And so yeah. So, and it was just kind of cool. These sort of hyper cerebral characters who were, creating all this, and they're a bunch of lunatics, and of course you have to have their creations turn against them. So you have the Sharkticons and all the Transformers, and it was kind of fun to just say, okay, let's explore those guys for a while, because they're really our gateway to the much larger universe of Transformers. Because Cybertron never really led anywhere, and we knew there were other planets, like Iacon and Char and stuff like that, out there. But it's like, well, let's go see them. And then I can never remember the name of it. What the Lithone, the planet that chowed down first
that was it. Yeah.
by and so it was just like, yeah, let's make it a space show, because these things can survive in there perfectly well. And probably, if we'd had 3 seasons, then you brought Optimus back. And I would have loved to see this season where it was half about Optimus and, and Megatron and Galvatron and all that at that moment. And then the other half of it was about, some kind of an odyssey. It's like Rodimus, doing an odyssey across space looking for, lost Transformers or something. And so we were trying to set it up to be whatever it wanted to be. But it was definitely of a very different nature than, fighting on Earth over at Energon. Because we had 130 episodes of that. We just, really, we need 131. Yeah.
The thing that I thought was funny is that the Quintessons were afraid of Spike. Like they thought, oh, these humans, I don't know. We don't know what's up with these guys.
Oh, yeah. No, he was like a total enigma to everybody. He was like, because, well, what you wanted like the least powerful and dangerous person in the whole story to be the one who the one that was the key, right?
Yeah, that is the payoff. He does save the day at the end because he's not mechanical.
Because he's not mechanical, and part of it was, at that time I was doing a lot of role-playing games and things, and we were trying to figure out, we were doing these miniatures out in the yard up at the guy who created Dungeons and Dragons house, and we were trying to figure out, how far can Megatron shoot and how big's the blast and all that. But we concluded pretty quickly that Transformers really weren't programmed to shoot at humans. So humans were kind of invisible to them and mysterious to them. Yeah, because they just didn't, it wasn't their original thing. Because if you did that, you don't have you don't have a fight, right? If they can just kill humans, they could do it in like one shot, and and they one spray and they killed everybody.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So
kind of explains how Spike survived all that time.
Yeah. Well, and so we, I just always figured that, the Quintessons, it was kind of like us having arachnophobia or something like that. I mean, we're not, it's kind of comical that humans are, afraid of these tiny little spiders.
You're talking to one here.
It's not that comical if you think about it.
John is very afraid of spiders. So that's a good analogy, though. I really like that. And it's and you always want to give. It's like Lord of the Rings or something. You want to have the hobbits, be the most, ultimately the most dangerous people in the whole universe, because they're certainly the least equipped to do anything in a normal sense. Yeah. And we also get introduced to Marissa Fairborn in during the 5 Faces of Darkness, who is, I mean, your take it's Flint's.
Yeah, it's Flint and Lady J's daughter, because I mean, those were when I was doing G.I. Joe, those were my favorite characters. So I decided, well, it's now all these years later, and they've had a kid, and they're settled back in Lady J's castle up in Scotland or wherever that castle is.
There you go. That's why she's got a British accent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was probably raised that, because I remember there's that one episode, Skeletons in the Closet. It was kind of the most, as far as Lovecrafty is. It would be almost a crossover with Inhumanoids. It wasn't, but it's a way to think. It was very Lovecrafty, and I decided, yeah, they have a daughter, and it'd be Marissa Fairborn, and there she is, and because they never would allow us, and to this day, they're and probably for very good legal reasons, you can't do real crossovers, but they kind of existed in the same universe. I mean, Hector Ramirez showed up, in both universes. So,
Right. Right. And there was that one episode with Cobra Commander, although it was never stated specifically that he was Cobra
Yes.
Commander. Yeah.
Yeah, we are always trying to sneak stuff like that in because it was just kind of irresistible. Because I mean, this in the same day I could be working on both shows, so it just seemed kind of strange to me that there was some invisible line you couldn't cross. Yeah, yeah, and I'll it's just fun later on to notice that stuff even now.
Yeah, definitely. Totally. I mean, I think as a kid, it kind of, some of it went over my head, but yeah, it's cool. It's still fine.
Well, but that's kind of what fan stuff ultimately is. The great thing about fan stuff is that it is your opportunity to do these things that kind of that were invisible to the kids, and as they should have been, because they were I mean that wasn't what we're selling.
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, the fan base is pretty much both, right? I mean, we watched both
Yeah.
shows. So
Well,
yeah.
Yes.
We pretty much watch everything Sunbow put out except maybe My Little Pony and Gem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are the two projects I never worked. I actually, that's not true. I did one story premise for Gem, and nobody had any interest in me working on My Little Pony, nor did I have any interest in it. But it just didn't happen. And but we had the other kind of weird shows. Doug did robotics, and then we had
Yeah, I love robotics.
muscle machines, and what were some of the other ones? There's some other funky one. It came up at the Boxborough Con, and I can't remember what the show was, or something I had nothing to do with. I'd forgotten all about. Yeah, because I mean, it was an amazing amount of work and product. I mean, it's 65 episodes a year. So I mean, it was just hard to pay attention. And usually I'd be working on more than one show, or I'd be like writing something like Muscle Machines or Inhumanoids or Visionaries while I'm working on Transformers, and so it was really hard to keep track of what was going on. And I sure wasn't out looking for, boy, I think I want to do My Little Pony this. I mean, but
Well,
yes,
what
I
question-
mean, yeah,
Sorry.
and tell you, well, that's the one thing. I mean, what's really funny about season 3 and parts of the movie, and Five Faces of Darkness in particular, is if you look at what comics people have followed up on, it's almost all that stuff. I mean, that was the TARDIS for the much, bigger, kind of darker versions of Transformers that would follow in other mediums. Even the Michael Bay movies would reference it a lot, because it's like, of course, you start out with the origin story, but after that, you're sitting somewhere around season 3 pretty quickly, because it more big screen cinematic, and certainly older and less kiddie.
Well, one of the
And
things I had noticed was the constant mention of death in this miniseries. Characters are always talking about death and dying. I was like, that's pretty heavy for a cartoon at the time.
well, we had that one character, Dirge, right? And then the characters you'd be like, because if they're characters you didn't use very often, and Dirge, you didn't get a whole lot of episodes. And so I remember writing him, and he just has to refer to death in every sentence. You know what I mean? And the whole thing, and because all the guys been killed in the movies, it's sort of this after a war thing where it's like, well, what happened to them? And that's where you have mausoleums and ghosts and zombies, and and so yeah, it took a much darker curve. And there was this period when everything was going dark. You know what I mean? Because Frank Miller, who I met during that period, was doing the Dark Knight, and it was like, oh yeah, let's do this stuff.
Let's have a
and
sweeps, get shot in the face, and then
Yeah, it has to. Yeah, you can always shoot a sweep in the face and without consequence. And and also I was working on Humanoids, which was about as it's as dark as cartoons went in those days. So that was influencing everything.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. But I think having so many characters were gone, but then so you get Swindle suddenly getting a lot of screen time. Just sort of Combaticon Swindle just gets
Yeah, if you
kinda,
didn't have
shine.
enough of Swindle, you would get it now. Because
Yeah, there's no
well,
Starscream or whatever, so you get.
Yeah.
thought that was
Well,
cool.
I really felt the absence of. I felt the absence of. Yeah. I mean, if you had to pick somebody who was unique really to Sunbow Project, it was probably Chris Latta. Just simply because he was such a unique character, and he was not. I mean, everybody else was. The voice guys were obviously just the A-list of Hollywood voice actors. I mean, every one of them. And so every once in a while you bring in an alien who's just a totally different critter than anybody else, and it changes the dynamic in the room. And I think, because he was Cobra Commander and Starscream, it also, he was very prominent in our shows and a bunch of other characters. But
Oh yeah,
um,
he was everywhere.
yeah, so that was, and he was a wild guy, and just it set a tone for the whole experience. It wasn't like any of the other guys.
One question that we've always, I think, wondered about was at the end of this 5 Phase of Darkness, you have this sort of Blitzwing, sort of like free agent guy, and was he ever even seen again? Like, what happened with Blitzwing? He seemed like he was going to be.
Well, I mean, what we're starting to do, and we're all in. The other thing that was happening around then, and it started in season 2 and happened, with GI Joe, was a lot. We were bringing all these comic book guys in from New York. I mean, first one was Roger Slifer probably, and because Steve Gerber was a comic guy. Comics guy. Buzz was he was really a kind of a pure animation guy. I mean, he's done a lot of comics, since then and probably during that period. But his career was all animation. I was really more a game guy. I was the only game guy that was there. I wasn't really comics. But Marv Wolfman comes in, and Len Wein, and I said Roger Slifer, and a bunch of them.
It was Jerry Conway. I remember.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Roy Thomas and Jerry Conway. And so that influence really just flooded in. And so with comics, they tend to approach things differently. You have character. I mean, I was interested in just sort of alignment charts, and I mean, we were very binary. We were either Autobots or Decepticons. I mean, binary in the robot sense, not. and you're either a good guy Autobot or a bad guy Decepticons. And we started thinking about, what if you have characters that are kind of like non-aligned, or they go rogue, or something happens to them, and and that can so we're experimenting with that, and we're all because we're trying to put them on alignment charts, like Dungeons and Dragons, where you have lawful good and chaotic evil, and and neutral and all that, and we had sort of no neutrals, and neutrals always make things interesting, so we started putting in more neutrals.
Yeah, it was cool. I remember, yeah, there were episodes where Octane kind of like went his own way or whatever, and
Yeah, because you figure they're not all thinking the same thing all the time, and they all get their agendas, they all have different things they want, and their world massively changed. And so what are they all going to do now? You're in space, and like kind of it's not the war's kind of over, but sort of it's kind of like the Wild West, when Jesse James's guys were Quantrell's raiders, and they were the kind of irregular troops, but then they turned into bank robbers, and it's like, what do these guys go do after this?
yeah, that's true. That's what do you do after a war? You're a soldier. All right, I guess.
Yeah,
Gotta do something.
and some of these guys just go home and they're farming, and they go back to doing whatever they did, in civilian life, and other ones, keep become gold miners, and other ones, explorers, and they're trying to conquer little tiny planets all their own and stuff like that. So we just figured that's what it'd be like, and in a weird way, almost like a police or a counterterrorism show more than a bitch war show.
One of the things too, I also was always curious about, and I don't know with what creative choice or whose creative choice, but like making Galvatron kind of crazy. Obviously, you want to separate him from Megatron, but he's like legit crazy. They even take him to therapy in later.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, I kind of like that. Like, I like crazy Galvatron and just punching his own guys all
Because
the
what
time.
you lose with think about sort of our formula is, when with the bad guys, you had two guys in control, one of them was sane and the other one was crazy. And in GI Joe, Cobra Commander was crazy, and Destro was pretty sane. And in Transformers, Megatron's pretty sane, and Starscream's crazy, right? And so now you don't have Starscream anymore, and frankly, the crazy leaders are kind of more fun,
Oh
and obviously, I mean, what you think about what's happened to the guy? He was Megatron, he gets turned into Galvatron, but somehow some other Megatron exists in the world, and that's got to confuse you and give you identity problems. And you've just lost a war, and you got transmogrified into something, and probably Unicron, who's now a head floating around the universe, is probably still inside your head. And so you're not going to be sane, because probably my guess is Unicron was just trying to take him over, because I mean, he still had power. He may have appeared to be dead and have had his eyes shot out and everything else, but he's still Unicron. Yeah, and so that's so it seemed like a good thing to have Galvatron, be kind of crazy, because because the rest of the Decepticons, it's the whole thing about when they're fighting over the Energon scraps and stuff like that. I mean, the rest of them have very practical problems, and they're running out of energy. And you got Galvatron, who still thinks he's gonna take over the universe, and might just pull it off. You never know.
Well, one of the things I liked about how you wrote Galvatron in this, he was crazy, but kind of sane at the same time. He had a plan, and it's as the season goes on, he gets more like a lunatic. But he was like a fairly legitimate threat, and not like a joke. And that's what I liked about this one.
Well, it's what people later would do with the Joker. You know what I mean? I mean, when the Joker started out in Batman, he was really crazy. Yeah, by the time you get to the Dark Knight movie, he's he's saying, "Do I look like a guy with a plan?" Well, when the first thing you do is this really elaborate plan, for the robbery and all that, you realize, yeah, he's very much a guy with a plan. And so you want you always want to surf, but because somebody's just crazy, just gets very uninteresting fast because they're crazy and you can't predict them. And somebody's totally sane gets boring, but when you got somebody who you don't know which side of them you're seeing. Yeah, that's one of the whole thing that's that was going on all the way through this is that everything had multiple facets to it.
Yeah, it's great. It was much better than just whatever good guy, bad guy, like you said. I always was a fan of Cyclonus too, but now looking back, I'm like, he was kind of a kiss ass, that guy.
Well, that you flipped the formula, and you had the insane leader and the
Right.
sane second in command from the way it was with Megatron and Starscream.
Who totally considered him as the second banana. I never got the feeling Cyclonus was particularly ambitious. He was happy just being Cyclonus. Because I mean, he had all his problems, too. Remember, because the animation error in the movie where there were two Cyclonuses.
Yeah.
And one of the things we do in the you got to see these stop motion videos we did when we get a chance, because what we're doing is trying to resolve that. I mean, who was it? Was that Bombshell, or was that I mean, which one's which, and what happened to the other one? And the point is, Cyclonus who's not, so they're probably he probably has the rest of leaders underneath them, and Cyclonus has lots of problems. So it's just easier to be the kind of the straight follower guy.
Because it's like Starscream was always trying to take over and get rid of Megatron, and then you get Cyclonus is like, "Hey, hail Galvatron! All right, even though you punch me every day, I'm."
Oh yeah, I would quit my job if I was getting knocked around like that.
Well, because you had to have somebody who was still following this guy. You know what I mean? Because I mean, nobody's trusting the Constructicons or the Insecticons or anybody else. And so part of that is being a little bit crazy. Also, keeps people from being as treacherous as they would be.
Yeah, they're afraid.
I mean, because the question with Starscream was always, why does Megatron put up with this guy?
Right. Yeah.
And I was doing a graphic novel series. This was IDW's continuity. I was doing it with Chris Metzen and Olivia Romandelli. And we were talking about that because the original backstory on Starscream was he was a medic. Like that's what he originally was. And so my theory always was that there was something wrong with Galvatron and only Starscream could fix it. So he had to keep this guy around. Even though, and Starscream was always leveraging him. Because, I mean, would you have somebody like Starscream around all the time?
Absolutely not.
Get rid of him.
So that was my theory on it.
I also want to talk a little bit. So in the movie, there's Autobot City, but then like, was that when did the Metroplex like toy or did that like? Is that why you're like, okay, it's not
I
just
can't
Autobot City,
remember
it's
when
actually
when Metroplex came out. I can't remember. To be honest with you, I don't remember. I mean, it just suddenly appeared, and that was our life. I mean, our life always was that we'd have toy lines get discontinued and recontinued, and and we'd get a fax in those before the internet, right? I mean, we had a bulletin board system, which was kind of a dress rehearsal for the internet, but from Hasbro and Sunbow, we'd just get a fax, and it would say, we're now discontinuing, ashtray and inserting, dipstick, and it's like, okay, yeah,
And you're like, you can insert dipstick.
yeah, right, exactly. Well, I mean, I mean, the first thing you try to do is if you had a scene with ashtray, and you try to turn it into dipstick, but not all characters overlap that easily, but and they weren't rigorous about it, but I mean, this was a toy company. But the funny thing that happened, and it's a good thing and a bad thing, but at a certain point, I mean, what we thought, like, I mean, the thinking behind killing Optimus and stuff like that was, we got to come out with the 86 line or the 87 line or whatever it was. And, they sold as many Optimus as they're going to sell. That's what they thought at the time. Nobody knew that you could sell 50 different iterations of Optimus, it just, and so you come out with constant new characters. We thought of it like sports teams, where you have, okay, New England Patriots, real different profile, 3 years ago than they have now. You know what I mean? The team changes, people leave, people come back, and we thought of it like that. So you just keep cycling people in, and it would go on forever. But what happens with franchises is eventually people settle on their favorite characters. Now, that having been said, when I'm at conventions, signing stuff, people come up with their DVDs and say they VHSs and stuff. I'll sign it. I always ask them, who's your favorite character? And it's never what you think. In other words, pretty much everybody's favorite character is the first one they were bought by their parents, and I mean, because you would have thought it would have been all Optimus, and it's not. Everybody sort of has their favorite, or it's just some character they particularly liked or someone that reminded themselves. But I mean, it's a much wider distribution. Like you guys, who are your favorite characters?
Ashtray is my favorite character.
Yeah, Ashtray. Well, wait until you see Dumpster Fire and Trainwreck. They're my new ones coming out.
But that ashtray, like, yeah, he could really disguise himself. I actually was a big Jazz guy. I thought Jazz was really, I don't know. I was always something for like the second in command. He was like right under Optimus Prime. Like,
right.
I don't know.
I gotta say, I guess Prowl would have been one of my favorites, and he was my first purchase as a Transformers.
There you go.
That is it.
You bonded with Prowl. And I mean, it is
very hard. Tore my heart out.
Yeah, well, he got discontinued. Once again, you got to see these stop motions. One of them is about. I could talk about them now because they've been premiered, but one of them is where Jazz reads the first draft of the script. It's like a blooper reel, and finds out he's being killed in the movie, and he's really bummed out about it. And they say, "What? So Starscream, so's Optimus. I mean, it's, we got a new season. You've been discontinued." And so he has to try to talk his way back into not being discontinued. Yeah.
That is funny though. It's true. I guess, the first toy that you had was the first Transformers toy was probably the one that you.
That was the pattern. Where were we? We were talking about dipstick. Oh no, we were just talking about that's the first one. The first one you got is, and that's the biggest pattern I found. And whether it was like one of the little ones, your mother would buy you when like you're at the supermarket and they just give you this thing, keep you busy for a while you're in the store, or it's the big elaborate Christmas one you get. It's just interesting.
Well, then that was the thing. Like, I never got the bigger ones. You know what I mean? Like, Omega Supreme, that's too much money for my parents. But as fans of John and I are fans of like Japanese monster movies and stuff, I feel like the Metroplex Triptychon thing was always pretty fun.
Kaiju Big Battle.
Big dinosaur.
Yeah, what's funny is One thing, Bob Prupus, who just passed away a few days ago, it's too bad. He was the head of Voice Toys at the time at Hasbro. Is he was telling me that the interesting thing is that the big ones were usually, when poor people would buy, it was not like rich people went out and bought their kids the expensive ones. They didn't want to spoil their kids. So they got to buy like the mid range. And yeah, it's parents that feel like they haven't given their kids enough. They're out buying the big stuff. And there's your weird little.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it kind of makes sense.
Is what's inside. Yeah.
But yeah, I like those. I don't know. I just because I was always, we were big Godzilla fans.
Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, and you want the big monsters and all that. And it was like, and to tell you the truth, I didn't really get the Dinobots at first. It's like, these are but Three Stooges, and they're like stupid characters. But what I realized is that everybody else did, and then sometimes you find a writer that has passion for them, like Don Bluth just loved the Dinobots. So it's like, okay, right?
He's a dinosaur guy, anyway. And so
yeah. And the actors are really fun. I mean, Greg Berger is really fun to work with. So I finally, got over it and learned to love Grimlock. But it's
That'll be the name of your next book. I finally got over it and
learned
to love Grimlock.
Learned to love Grimlock. Yes, yeah.
Well, it's funny because Grimlock did change. I feel like in this, right around this time with the third season, or he became more of like a goofy kind of like.
Yeah,
the first few episodes.
I think those guys were comic relief, and they're so big and scary, and they played really nicely off a cup, and so yeah. I mean, in my mind, they found their home. I found the group that they fit with.
Yeah,
and then I told my wife that the voice of Grimlock was also the voice of Odie in the.
Yes. Oh, those guys have done a lot. You just look at any of the IMDb pages for any of those guys, and it's amazing. I mean, they just have had amazing careers, and they're still working. And what's the thing about voice actors that I didn't know until it was explained to me is their voices don't change. Okay, in other words, if they keep their voices in tune, they don't hear stuff like this. I mean, that's just one of the really cool things about it.
Yeah, and they can work.
Yeah. And so all of them were in there. We were doing this just a month ago, 2 months ago. We were doing the stuff for the stop motion, and sure enough, they're doing. John Mashida's in there, and I always forget they're also really good actors. And so they were just ad-libbing stuff. I just write basically but how do you write for Blur? It'd be like a page long writing all the all the stuff. And so I just wrote kind of my sense of what he ought to say. And next thing I knew, John Machida had ad-libbed the stuff that was better than what I'd written, just in the in the into the thing. I mean, and that's the other sort of hidden element is just how talented they are. And a lot of times when you're writing a script, you're moving all these characters around, right?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Peter Cullen at a Boston Comic-Con a couple of years ago, and he sounds exactly the same, and it's just crazy.
June Foray that did all the women's voices on the Looney Tunes, like she was still voice acting into her almost to when she died.
Yes.
Crazy.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, all these guys, can still do it. It's Michael Bell that was demonstrating to me how the voices don't change, because he was saying somebody called up and they were kind of timidly asking, can you still do this character? Guy voice, and then you find out his voice hasn't changed at all. That was one of the great things about it. But it's fun just keeping up with these guys.
Except for Casey Kasem, I guess, right? He was.
I guess he's not talking.
We don't need to get into.
We talked about that last time.
So. Yeah, we talked about that last time. I guess really quick. Speaking of him, though, I was a little bummed to see the Ark get destroyed in this 5 Faces of Darkness. The Triptychon just comes along and smashes it. It's like, oh.
Yeah, it's just kind of dead. I realized what kind of a sacred object it was. It's called the Ark. I should have figured it out. But anyway, they probably wouldn't have done that. But you just also too, I guess, season 3 we were just getting reckless. We started, in the sense that we were used to destroying stuff, and we were, and we knew we were changing things, and so you had to, topple some of the old stuff to bring in the new.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It adds stakes. It makes, like,
Yeah, and again, that's still why this felt like a second movie, just not animated as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm telling you, at some point I would love to have another shot at that and get it really right because it was just so flawed. I mean, where the movie, like, everything was gone over 50 times and there are 900 iterations of the storyboard and all that. Five Faces just got, was just so production challenged. Let me put it
Mm.
that.
well, if there's ever like a Kickstarter or something to reanimate the Five Faces of Darkness, we'll donate. And
Okay, yeah,
yeah,
I'll call you as soon as
we'll be in on that.
As long as we can have voice cameos as Dipstick and Ashtray.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
just
send it.
freaking ashtray, yeah, and nozzle and yeah.
I assume Ashtray is a kind of one of the mini guys, but
Yeah, you see the mini guy, yeah,
Okay.
you know.
yeah, but I mean, it would be cool. I mean, it is like like we said, for us, it was like a second movie, and it was a chance to see a few little clips like here and there. It was, I don't know, it was
Well, it's one of
cool.
those things people discover, you know what I mean? Because I think it was really shocking when it came out. Because imagine if you hadn't seen the movie. and
Yeah,
you-
I actually
you
did want to
see a
ask about that.
Transformer
How
movie,
you approached going about this.
and we just assumed that you'd seen the movie. I mean, we
Right.
just approached it as you've seen the movie or one of your friends has, and they'll explain it to you. I mean, that was the weird thing about it, the Transformer movie. When you think about it, I compare that to any sort of reboot or how normally be approached by a studio now. The thing was interesting about it was it didn't spend a lot of time introducing you to the concept of what a transformer was or anything else. It just went in there assuming you knew, and which is probably why it was so great for fans and had to be utterly incomprehensible to
Right, yeah.
the way.
Anyone it was not.
Yeah, yeah. If you were not, in on the joke, you had no idea what you're looking at. Even some poor parent going in there and it's going, what?
Yeah, my parents probably had no idea.
Yeah,
Man,
yeah.
I dragged them. I dragged any
You,
adult I knew.
you dragged him in there, and that's that's permanent parent cred.
It's true.
Yeah,
I
if
did
they
a lot
see
of
the
clothes
Transformer
shopping.
movie, yeah, you by definition have good parents. That's
Well, it's true. It's true. And then they all love the "oh shit" line. So yeah.
well, yeah, which of course everybody knows was put in there. He could be that never existed to the best of my knowledge in any version of the script. That was picked up later on because the distributors were worried about coming out with a G movie, that they felt that would be toxic. So they decided, hey, let's put an obscenity in there, and so and so we'll for sure get a PG-13 rating, and we won't be one of these being the G movie ghetto. So
Yeah.
that's what that was for.
Well, we chuckled as well. We don't want to take up any more of your time, I guess.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I can always come back. I ought to get back to work and do my real job, but whenever I'm bored, I'll come back.
I think I would love to hear about like the Inhumanoids, Visionaries kind of
Oh,
stuff
yeah.
too, because
that'd be great.
that's stuff you don't know as much about. You don't hear as much about those.
No. I mean, what's funny about both those shows is they both have incredibly hardcore fan bases. I mean, there's like a pub in Scotland that screens Visionaries all day. Like a Visionaries themed pub somewhere that I got to go find.
Yeah, seriously, that sounds
But
awesome.
I mean, Visionaries has fanatic followers, as does Inhumanoids. But there were things you had to catch. I mean, Visionaries, the product line was canceled before the show aired, and and Humanoids was one of those things that they were so used to having everything be a phenomenon that when it only took $80 million in business, oh, that's not even worth doing. I mean, any Detroit company
Right.
build that $80 million product line now. But so yeah, I mean, it's just kind of just fate. Laws changed, and the times changed, the world changed. And I think in the case of Inhumanoids, and to some extent with Visionaries, if we're honest about it, the toys themselves were just kind of crap. I don't know that anybody was that excited about the holograms inside the Visionaries. And the Inhumanoid toys, what their idea was that the monsters were both. Well, we'll save this for the Inhumanoid episode.
Yes. Yes.
I can't wait.
Yes.
I can't wait
Okay.
for that.
All right,
Yeah,
great.
we'll-
Let's do it, guys.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you again. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great talking to you.
You can insert Dipstick